Welcome to the Regenerative Brands podcast. This is a place for consumers, operators, and investors to learn about the consumer brands supporting regenerative agriculture and how they're changing the world. This is your host, Kyle, joined by my co-host, AC, who's going to take us into the episode.
On this episode, we have Chris Langwallner, who is the co-founder and CEO of WhatIF Foods. WhatIF Foods is supporting regenerative agriculture with their Bambnut milks and Bambnut noodles, all made with the Bambara groundnut as the key ingredient. In this episode, we learn about Chris's grandfather and his upbringing in Austria that inspired him to leave the world better than he found it, plus the incredible regenerative ecosystem being built around the Bambara groundnut, stretching across multiple continents. Man, this episode was a good one, y'all. We learned all about the amazing forgotten crop, the Bambnut, how WhatIF is improving communities in Africa with its cultivation, biochar, regen certifications, retailer relationships, and so much more. Let's dive in. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Regen Brands podcast. Really excited today to have our friend Chris from WhatIF Foods with us. So welcome, Chris.
Hi, everybody. Hey, I'm looking forward to this session. I can't wait to get started.
Thanks, Chris. We're excited to have you. If anybody couldn't tell, the AC's intro was a little bit lower key today. It is 6:30 in the morning for today's recording. So shout out to Chris and Anthony for being here to accommodate my work schedule. Doing this one early. So thank you both for that. Really appreciate it. Chris, we're excited to connect. Before we dive too deep into the origin story, give us a quick lay of the land. You know, for those who are unfamiliar with WhatIF Foods, what sort of products do you produce? What flavors are they? What categories are they in? Give us like the lay of the land.
We are a company that basically produces planet-based foods. We have two major categories that we have products for. One is the planet-based Bambnut milk. You can find us roughly there about 1,000 stores throughout the US, predominantly East Coast as well as West Coast, a little bit in the middle. And then we have our noodles category, which you call here the ramens, and those are available online predominantly. We are scaling capacity, and we look forward to actually bringing them to you guys through our offline sales as well, hopefully very, very soon.
Love it. Love it. We have not had the products. I'm looking forward to it. I've heard amazing things.
You did not?
Yeah, not yet.
My mistake. I should have sent to you.
No, it's been crazy. As in, I'm recording a podcast at my girlfriend's place in California. Crazy lately, so I'll fall on that sword and say life's just been wild. But Chris, we're super excited to have you. I think you have one of the most interesting business models and stories and businesses to just chat about on this podcast. So really excited for you to share that with everybody. Take us through, just how this all got started. I know you have some interesting Austrian roots that kind of have subconsciously inspired it. And then you've had some interesting professional journey as well that were a part of it. So how did all this get started?
I guess, it got all started back home in Austria, about 20 kilometers or probably 15 miles north of Salzburg. I grew up in a village setting of about 700 people, and this sort of community was deeply embedded around the church. So there was the butcher, there was the major restaurant or pub or inn, however you want to call it. It's basically the hangout place for all the folks. Opposite neighbor to us, the bakery, then the mayor, and then the school. And my grandfather was a huge figure in that community. A man who had the backs of his fellow folks out there, and reflecting quite a fair bit about what influenced my journey profoundly. My grandfather always comes up. He always pops up. I had the pleasure. I was about 13 or so when he passed away, but I remember him vividly. He was probably the Netflix of his days in the community. He planted stories. He made sure the next episode comes. So it was amazing as a grandchild to see him going out and planting a story. And we knew this is a lie. And then he comes back. And the folks, his friends, they always come back to him. So I loved it. Yeah. We knew what he does, but these folks who know him for 50 years didn't. But here's one thing that really popped up in the very recent past frequently. And that is that my grandfather, he always said to us children, he said, do leave the world a better place than how you found it. And to me today, that sentence is so deeply ingrained in how I'm thinking. And today, if you look at the definition of regeneration, which is creation of more life, leaving the world a better place than how you found it, is something that actually resonates with me a lot. And I think this is where I really get the motivation from. So it's about this community setting, people having each other's back, really being also a shaper and a mover in a way, my grandfather, and therefore taking people on a journey with him as well.
Yeah.
That ability really, really shaped me.
Yeah, that's really cool. Love that. And I can certainly relate to that. There's certain things about our family legacies that we can't explain that inspire us to be certain ways and do certain things. It's a beautiful thing. How has that translated into your work, and how, give us a little bit about your work background and what led to WhatIF?
Unconsciously, probably more than 2 decades ago, more than 20 years ago, my wife and I made a decision to leave Austria behind for 2 years. That was 20 years ago. in order to explore, and actually the first stint to the UK, I worked in Bristol for a huge multinational to start with, after getting going in the industry, originally looking into seasonings and spices and so on and so forth. And my wife and I left because we wanted to actually grow our careers, and English is an important part. We Austrians are lazy with regards to that. So therefore, picking up English on the street in Bristol was a hell of an undertaking. It took me about 6 months to get there, to be understood. And it was fantastic. From there, 9/11 shaked, of course, globally the world. And so it did shake my career. It gave me a total different new path. And at that point in time, there was an Austrian entrepreneur who knocked on my doors, and I happened to help him turn a business around in Russia. So I've worked there for 3 years. I saw the wild side of business, quite frankly. And in 2005, I then decided, together with my wife, that we want to make an impact. And we knew at that point in time, nobody's waiting of Chris in Europe doing another seasoning sort of company, because we wanted to do it as entrepreneurs. And so we had decided to actually go to India and start a business in India. And I'm looking back today and saying, oh God, 2005, 2006, we relocated. We had 2 little children. They went to local schools, and it was a fantastic journey. We ran into the financial crisis. We ran into the Arab Spring. Our core market was the Middle East, and then it was the Arab Spring, and then our core market broke away. So it was challenging like hell.
Wow.
But here you are. This is where you learn the resilience that you need in order to build businesses. Nothing comes for free. Nobody's waiting for you. It's a big learning. Nobody's waiting for you. You think you have the best product. You think you have the best strategy. You think you have everything you need. Nobody's waiting for you. So here you go. A big learning. Yeah, and from there, I just loved building this business. Today, it is India's largest seasoning company, producing tons and tons of excellent products, and employing hundreds, if not 1,000 people. And all of those folks have had a fantastic opportunity to grow their own career. And that's what I call impact. I'm a huge fan of impact through work, through jobs, through regenerative economies, rather than through charity. I don't like charity at all. I think it leaves just false hopes behind. And that's what I unconsciously also built somehow in India. And by the way, my joint venture partner, way back then, a gentleman known as C.V. Jacob, started again a business 51 years ago, done fantastically well, and built also the business in a community setting, which again influenced me very well. So C.V. Jacob and my grandfather, they had so much in common, though they never met each other. And yeah, that shaped me. That shaped my outlook. Then lived a little bit in China, and then I moved to Singapore and started that journey towards WhatIF Foods about 9 years ago. And here I am.
Chris, how many different countries have you lived in?
I don't know. I don't know.
I
don't know.
That was England, India, Singapore, China, US, at least Russia. Right now. So that's 5 plus Austria, Russia. So that's up to 7 at this point.
That's amazing,
which is wild.
Man.
I want to. I mean, there's a lot of questions I want to ask you, and I really just appreciate the way you sort of like molded what was happening geopolitically almost with your career and how that kind of pushed you into different areas. That was really fascinating to hear. But I'm curious. You are obviously a seasoned professional, which that's pun intended there with seasoning companies. Um, what made you what made you most
Good one.
interested in coming to the U.S. market and starting this regenerative brand here in the United States? And at what point in time did this like concept of soil health and regeneration from like a food perspective, when did that get on your radar, and what was sort of like the moment where you said like I need to be a part of this industry, I want to be a part of this movement?
More than 10 years ago, probably even longer, I was deeply worried about SDG 15, so life on land and soil degradation. So it was when I did a science incubator that actually is the precursor to WhatIF Foods. When we walked through the world and we touched the soil, and then you see literally just being dust being left after all the nutrients being extracted by current agricultural practices, my heart broke apart. Again, my grandfather pops into mind because he was the one who knew his farm very, very well. He could go out and he saw indicator plants and he knew what to do. He knew what sort of systems he has to put in place in order to rejuvenate and restore a particular parcel of land. And today, who does that? Which farmer is out there? Smallholder farming communities do, because they have to. They cannot sit on large scale tractors and move around and so on and so forth. And the regen movement does that again. The regeneration movement actually goes out and touches the soil, smells it, and so on and so forth. And you see that in many, many videos and clips out there on social media. So 10, 15 years ago, I started to really be worried about the soil degradation, because here's a simple logic. At this moment in time, we lose about 20 soccer fields or 25 soccer fields worth of arable land. At the same time, we are destroying equal amount, that per minute. At the same time, we are destroying about 25 soccer fields worth of primary forests. So we are deforesting to make fresh land available for a system that degrades land and leaves 25 soccer fields behind.
I want to reiterate
That
that
is
point real
just bloody
quick.
insane.
Yeah, exactly. That is a wild
wow.
statistic, and I appreciate you bringing that to the table. I just want to say that one more time. So you're saying that every minute we're destroying 20 to 25 soccer fields worth of soil and 20 to 25 soccer pitches worth of forested land. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. So one is to make new land available for our existing agriculture, and with soil degradation, we leave parcels of land behind unproductive. And the big challenge here is this: with degradation of soil and soil health, community health goes down the drain. Why? Because a farmer doesn't have the opportunity to parcel his land up, put it in a U-Haul, and go to the next farm. It doesn't work like that. A factory setting, you can do that. You can actually parcel up your assets and bring it to a new production location. A farmer can't, right? So here is the problem. If we do not bring proper food systems to these folks that actually can help restore the production capacity of the land at the farm, we set people in motion. We find them at the borders as migrants. And this is sometimes a white elephant in the room. But to me, it isn't, because it's just a natural conclusion. It's an unintended consequences of land degradation. And we see it everywhere in the world, particularly in Africa, in Asia, and other parts. So it is the call to our 10, 15 years ago for me was to basically say, look, if you want to come in with a new diversified diet that for me is the best, is the healthiest way of eating, is a diversified diet. So if you want to bring back nutrients that we need in order to replenish the nutrients on a day-to-day basis, might as well diversify our diet away from 12 crops and 5 animals that make more than 75% of all food that is being consumed, and the big four, do away with them. And I said, and there's degraded arable land. It sits there idle. Folks can't produce on it. Therefore, it doesn't yield them any income. So might as well go out and try to find a crop that actually restores that production capacity. And that's how I got going. And that was the thought process that basically made me alert to looking out for opportunities such as the Bambara. And here we are, probably 5, 6, 7 years later, having launched in the US.
And this is going to be a really interesting episode for our audience, because I bet a lot of them have not heard of the Bambara before, and I know there's but that's the colloquial name that y'all have created to make it a little more easier on the palate and more marketable. I think you told me, Chris, on a previous call, it's the Bambara nut is the full name. But man, this plant, it seems almost too good to be true. It seems so cool and special for what it can do from an agronomy perspective and from a nutrition perspective. So we're going to talk about this for a long time. I know Kyle's going to have 17 follow-up questions, but just give people a feel for what's going on with this plant, where y'all are doing this work with the farmers, what you're doing with the farmers, and let's just talk about the agronomy piece and how it helps with the land first.
Probably I get into answering this question by just quoting the Rockefeller Foundation, because they have said that nowhere in the world we are growing enough legumes, neither do we consume enough legumes. And if you go to a backside of the envelope calculation, you would actually quickly realize that by growing an equal amount of legumes that we actually grow cereal crops, we would stop needing synthetic fertilizers, because nitrogen fixation would happen naturally. And the Regen movement exploits that idea anyways. And here we are. So the Bambara groundnut is a legume that fixes nitrogen, particularly in combination with biochar. It almost doubles it in one cycle. And it is a crop that essentially humbly comes from today Mali, at a tribe called the Bambara tribe. Basically, the Bambara tribe cultivated it the first time. And therefore, folks in and around West Africa refer to it, hey, this is the Bambara bean from the Bambara folk. They also speak a language called Bambara. And Mali today, if you travel towards east, there's Burkina Faso, and then south of it is Ghana, and this is where we're operating currently. And it's a fascinating hardy crop that survives very, very harsh conditions. It's heat tolerant, it's drought tolerant. It needs very little water. It needs water for germination, so you have to hit the monsoon. But thereafter, it doesn't like too much water either. Otherwise, it doesn't do well. Neither does it like too good soils. So you really need to go with the Bambara on poor soil.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's awesome. Actually, though, we need more things that don't like good soil,
right?
Yeah,
make it better.
Yeah.
I mean, it immediately makes me think, like, once you fix all this soil, you got to come up with a secondary product line to cultivate in this regenerated soil, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
that's exactly what it is.
Love that. And so it sounds like you are from like a product development perspective, right? You're looking for degraded land first, then figuring out what sort of crop you can grow in that degraded land to have the type of impact you want to have. And then part 3 then becomes, how do you bring that product to market? And especially with something that's brand new, this nut that I had never heard of before. Walk us through that a little bit. What does that look like? You have this incredible product. What did the R&D phase look like? How did you decide you wanted to do alternative milks with that versus some other application? And again, I want to bring it back to like why, or I guess preface that question with, is the US your primary marketplace here? And if so, why?
So let me start answering that question, because we have asked me that before and I forgot to answer. So apologize for that.
It's okay.
Look, the United States is our primary
We ask
market.
a lot of multi-question questions, Chris, so we make it challenging. So we apologize for that.
Yeah, you make it challenging. I have a little notepad here. I should actually look down and see if I answered or not. But yeah, so why the US? It's actually quite simple. The US is a huge consumer. The United States is receptive for the idea of a business like ours. And you guys are movers and shakers. What happens in the US is going to be replicated elsewhere in the world. So in order to drive impact, you might as well go to the US and leave a footprint, however big or small it is, leave a footprint behind for us then to start replicating it elsewhere. So the US is leading in many, many aspects of the world. And we also see it is leading in the regen movement. And here I am, trying my best of luck. Sometimes feels a little bit like an exploration, but it's a fantastic journey. And to be honest with you, I feel welcome. That's the most amazing part of it, is that I feel just welcome. Every day, everywhere I go, be it New York, be it Los Angeles, or be it here in Phoenix, where I am right now, the doors are open, and that's super cool. That's really, really cool.
Yeah.
So what was the other question? I should the other question.
It's all good. No, I appreciate the perspective. And I guess I want to spend a little bit of time there. As somebody, I've spent a little bit of time traveling, not nearly as much as you have, but I will often feel like the U.S. is behind in some capacities, especially when it comes to, I spent time in Australia and New Zealand and the dairy industry and some of the meat quality things there. I feel like we're behind in some aspects. So it's really interesting to hear your point of view, especially because you are so well traveled and you spent so much time working in these industries in all of these different places. And yeah, just to get like a foreigner's perspective on how the U.S. can impact the rest of the planet, I think that's really, really interesting. So the other question I asked was, you from a product development perspective, you find the degraded land, you find the right crop to grow in that degraded land. How do you then bring that product to market? How did you start exploring the different categories that you could potentially use that nut in? Why did you end up in plant-based milk? Walk us through that process.
Here we go, and that actually leads me to explain why we call the company WhatIF Foods.
Yeah.
The process that we adopted as a science incubator was always a lead question with what if. What if we take the deep fryer out of making instant noodles? What is the new horizon that opens up? What can we do if we don't have 20% of palm oil in the noodle, in the ramen, because we're not deep frying anymore? So those were essentially science and probing questions as to what could a new horizon look like? How could it look like? How could the universe unfold? And in the work that we did as a science incubator, we always started with what if questions. And a set of what if questions then get you into basically throwing a particular product into the lab/kitchen and almost like do cooking competitions and say, what is possible with this thing?
Yeah.
How do we, what comes out? And then you create, also for IP purposes, you create a ton of different recipes. And you narrow down and say, hey, this is really, really working well here. This is not so good over here, but this one is just fantastic. And that gets us always going. Every time we explore something like that, we as foodies in back home in Singapore, where we have our central R&D or the more fundamental R&D, we do things like that. So that is basically the way to get to explore different categories. And then our third pillar of regeneration, which is replenishing the nutrients we need on a day-to-day basis, gives us a mandate to basically rethink the production process of the ingredients to start with. Look, the reality of the fact is that nobody has done Bambara groundnut on any significant scale. We are the first one who is taking the Bambara groundnut into a significant scale, and therefore production processes don't exist. So we are the first one who takes the Bambara beans, botanically they are beans, we take the beans and we convert it into a set of ingredients that then ultimately become part of the dough structure for the ramen, or is then being the foundational base for the portfolio of our milks. And that had to be invented. And it sounds easy. You take a bean and mill it down, you are there. No, not as easy as that. If you do
right.
If you do
only it were that
do
easy.
it at home.
Yeah.
It is not. If you do it that way and make milk out of it, tomorrow you have a jelly in the fridge. So there are significant challenges that then have to be resolved. But where I want to get to with this is probably a little bit about how we knew from literature that there is a fantastic fiber fraction in the Bambara groundnut. Complex carbohydrates as well as fibers, plus all the 9 essential amino acids, 20 to 25 protein, good quality fatty acids. That's why it's a complete crop, a complete food in its own right. But we knew, and we suspected it's a prebiotic. Now we know it's a prebiotic. So we knew that there are complex carbohydrates in there. And that fascinates somebody like me who loves systems. Because if you put just one prebiotic fiber into a product as an ingredient, you're just helping one microorganism species in your microbiome. But if you take it from a whole plant, which has several different versions of a prebiotic fiber and fibers, you are helping the entire microbiome to be healthy. So we knew it. And then my folks, including Margaret, who was very stubborn at that point in time, Margaret also happens to be my wife, she sat down and she said, Chris, get off my hook. I don't want to refine this plant. I don't want to segregate the protein away from the fibers and the carbohydrates. I want to keep it together. And I want to find a process that allows me to actually then rehydrate the product into a milk without losing a single bean. And that was the big breakthrough. And if you look at our call outs with regards to the huge fiber content, the huge protein content, it is because we leave the bloody crop intact. We don't segregate stuff. We leave it together. That's, of course, a huge challenge from a technology point of view and from a science point of view. It took us many, many hours and sleepless nights to get there. Yeah. But today we are producing in millions of liters. So we have figured it out. And I'm super proud of my folks who have been instrumental on that journey.
Chris, how's the marketing and the sales team communicating all this to retailers and to customers, right? Because it's no one's ever heard of Bambnut milk, or I'm sure the awareness is very low here in the US. There's this amazing nutrition. There's this amazing company behind it doing amazing work with farmers. Like, how are you telling that whole story? I mean, the website's awesome.
Just amazing branding. I was just going to say that. Amazing branding. I mean, you guys you certainly don't look like a startup. It feels polished and professional and intentional in all of the best ways.
For sure.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I will make sure my folks listen to this podcast. Because
we're just trying to increase our viewership. That's all we're trying to do, you know?
Yes. Okay. You have me there. I'll help. Getting this story out there is very difficult. It is very, very, very difficult. It's a big lift because we are having an attention span of not even a second anymore on all the social media. The channels are going wild. People are flipping over. And then even more than that, we find so many people we try to communicate to are just given up. They're just hopeless. Those who really care about our planetary health and community well-being, if they don't see themselves with tools at their disposal to actually do something about it, they have given up. So it is really, really a big challenge. However, what we understood, particularly talking to Gen Zs, and that's also the reason why our design work is like that, because we want to speak to Gen Zs, is that, look, Gen Zs is the first generation that have been educated in kindergarten on sustainability. They are native in sustainability, and they sniff through the BS immediately. So with Gen Zs, we don't have to communicate too much. They sniff it immediately. And then when we started to go out and speak to them with our message that we are a planet-based company, all of a sudden they said, stop. What is that? Okay, and then they drill in. So that we believe that the widest door that we can push open for folks to come in is planet-based. And honestly, I love it because when I started the brand work, I didn't want to be known as a vegan brand, a vegetarian brand, a plant brand. I didn't want to be known as that because it is very niche, and quite frank, these brands tend to be exclusive to one particular segment. Divisive, exclusive, they can be right, blah, blah, blah. And in order to make an impact, we need to bring folks on the table. We need to we need to start having a conversation that gets us forward and not what we are doing currently. So I didn't want to do that. But what it actually did is, in the first year when we started marketing the product in Singapore, I left and the brand left a vacuum in the media landscape. And they actually pulled us into, this is another plant-based movement, a plant-based product. And it took us some time to recognize it. But then when I understood it, I said, okay, we need to do a proper positioning work here and take the brand into where it belongs to. And that is planet-based. Because regeneration in today's day and age is a global challenge.
Yeah.
If we believe that the CO2 cloud up there in our atmosphere knows borders, we are wrong. It doesn't matter. The atmosphere goes around everywhere. So regeneration is a global issue. We need to think globally. Sustainability, you might resolve challenges with communities locally, which we also do. But regeneration is a global issue. You think about water footprint. We've taken so much water out of this planet that it tilted 80 centimeters per now. It freaks me out. It scares the shit out of me, quite frankly. And therefore, we need to start thinking totally differently. We need to start thinking, how can we come together in order to resolve a global challenge that doesn't know boundaries and borders? How can we resolve that together through a total new system approach? And here we are.
Mm. Well,
I love that answer for so many different reasons, and there's so many other pieces I want to like dive in there and unpack. I don't know if you've listened to any of our episodes previously or not, but you were really speaking Anthony Nye's language in the big tent inclusivity versus exclusivity.
yeah,
You know, the I don't want to call it the enemy of regeneration, but big ag and industrial extractive agriculture is the problem. It's not meat based, it's not plant based, it's the processes in which we grow all of our food. So I love the way that you chose intentionally to not affiliate yourself with any of these exclusive movements. So I think that's really cool. And as you were speaking, I kept thinking intentionality is just like a recurring theme that keeps coming up. The way, obviously every company that produces food is producing it on the planet. They're all planetary companies, but to reframe that the way you have and to make it seem like, again, intentionally that you're trying to focus on fixing the whole planet. Again, just really a kind of novel approach there that I really appreciate. I do want to dig into like one very specific question about like your LOI. So I was just looking at your website, and LOI's list of ingredients. It's very common in nut milks to have some relatively cheap oils added in there, and I'm noticing that you're using coconut oil, which I'm assuming there's a reason for that. And I'd love for you to kind of dive in and tell us why you're choosing to use coconut oil, which is more expensive, higher quality, and in my opinion, better for human consumption. So walk us through that choice.
It tastes good. As simple as that.
Yeah.
It is just a fantastic tasting product, in particular in combination with the Bambara. Because at the end of the day, if products are not tasty, folks will not adopt it. They may buy you once from a shelf because they are intrigued by the packaging, but the probably repurchasing becomes a huge issue. So at the end of the day, food has to taste nice. You know, if we are satisfied with what we have had and then reflect on, okay, I've now actually done super cool stuff. I have made an impact with what I've just eaten. Then I would say my job, tick. I'm a happy man. I'm probably the happiest man on this planet. So the true answer is, I mean, we have tried literally all oils out there that you can find out there, and we have narrowed down to the coconut because it just is the tastiest product, and then it has super cool other functions in combination with the Bambara, like the formability of it and so on and so forth. And if you also have paid attention to the list of ingredients that we have, particularly in our three milks, the barista, the everyday, and the airy, we only have essentially three ingredients, and one of it is water, the Bambara, and then coconut oil. And we distinguish the functionality and the purpose of the products through the process of the ingredient. So the barista is a super cool foaming product that is creamy, and while as the airy really fantastic in smoothies and in protein shakes and what have you, that sort of applications. And we love it for that. And we have designed it with the same set of ingredients using processes to get us there, which is another differentiation from other products that are out there, because sometimes it's just a new brand. They fall back on the same supply chains as so many others. They have only a choice of so many ingredients from that set of suppliers, and therefore they are just, it's difficult for them to really innovate around that. Our process is totally different. From the bean into the ingredients and then ultimately into the milk or into the flour is a totally different novel process. And it allows us to approach the ingredients list also very, very different. And it's a fantastic journey, and coconut oil for the taste.
I want to double back, Chris, real quick to the global impact framing, right? Like, I think this is really cool because we have a supply chain largely based in Africa that's being commercialized in the US. And we have a gentleman who spends his time all over the place, mainly in Singapore, that's kind of, the CEO and the founder of the company. I just think that's one, really cool. Two, you shared some incredible stories with me around the farmer livelihood piece of this, how receptive that community's been in Africa to growing this crop. Like, can you just share some of that with the audience and some of the success y'all have had with the farmers there?
Gosh, how long do we have? I can talk hours and hours and hours over that piece. It's the community and the community well-being. Look, let me just set the context. Northern parts of Ghana, as well as in the Sahel region, all over Africa, modern agriculture has left 40% of children below the age of 5 stunted behind. The reason is
that sucks, man.
They are growing food, they are growing crops that are exported. So we have products on our plates in the US and in Europe and anywhere else in the world that have been grown in these communities, yet their children get stunted, 40% of them below the age of 5. And I like setting the context around this because children below the age of 5 obviously are not older than 5. So something major has gone wrong in the last decade. So what is it that has really, really gone wrong? And it is direct correlation, in my eyes, to soil health. The moment the soil health falls off the cliff, the farmers can't produce the yields anymore they need in order to pay their debt. If they cannot pay their debts anymore, then they are forced to sell out all the stocks that they otherwise have for their own consumption. And therefore, they're running out of food. So we're leaving not only poverty behind, but increasing hunger through the existing system. Stop, pause. Very doomy sort of a landscape right there. But here comes a company that works with something that is originally, that originates there, the Bambara Groundnut. And here we come and we go into this community and we go to the chief of the community and we say, look, you don't know us, we don't know you. We cannot expect you to trust us. Neither will we trust you initially. It's a two-way stream. But here is what we would like to do. We would like to work with you equitably on the Bambara groundnut that is native to you. We don't have to explain to you how wonderful the Bambara groundnut is for your soil restoration piece. You already know it. You would love to double down on it. And that was the entry point for us working with communities. Scott and I, Scott of the Pond Foundation and I, when we started this work about 2 years ago, 18 months, 2 years ago, we said, first year, let us celebrate at 250 farmers. Guess what happened after 4 months of our work? Our subscription list of farmers, folks who wanted to work with us, was 2,000.
Wow.
Just by going in differently.
Wow.
We do not have a contract with us. There are other folks go in there and make these farmers sign contracts. They are sometimes as thick as this, half an inch.
Yeah.
These folks can't read it. They signed something, and then what do you do if that farmer defaults that contract? Are you going to sue him for that $1 a day he makes? Got to be kidding me. What is this all about? This is just absolutely nonsense to me. So we went in there. We asked the permission to work with the community through the chiefs. The chief recognized our sincere intention. And here we are in the middle of the community all of a sudden. 4 months later, we had 2,000 people. And then we found ourselves, we did not know. In the absence of proper food, and listen to this, the Bambara groundnut is not only a forgotten crop, but it has almost been eaten to extinction in certain pockets of West Africa. And the reason is because you have 40% of children below the age of 5 being stunted, and hence there is hunger in the community. And if you have a hungry family, you actually eat up the seeds that you otherwise use to plant for next crop season.
Wow.
So the seeds have been eaten up.
Wow.
So it was a tremendous heavy lifting in the first year to get our hands on seeds. We just got enough seeds for about 980 farmers to work with in the first year. But we did so. We distributed the seeds. Here's another fantastic story that I love to share.
Yeah.
Because we kicked off the seed sourcing a little bit late because we did not know. We underestimated that so much seeds have been eaten up already. So we actually distributed seeds a little bit late to certain communities. And, some of them are really, 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 really poor, and we don't have an agreement with them. But guess what happened? Because of our approach, if they didn't plant it, they didn't eat it, they actually brought the seeds back to us. They said, sorry, this year we cannot participate. Here's the seed back. That's partnership. That is being honest with each other, right? And we basically love that story as much as we love the story where the farmers in the first year started to succeed in growing the Bambara groundnut. So fast forward, through Casima, our local partner, as well as the Pond Foundation, supervising everything that we are doing, and us, we have about 15, 20 people on the ground. We go out with field officers to the communities. We try to help them figure out what's the best system. We work with local universities as well, tap into talents there, and what have you. Fast forward, harvesting season. At the harvesting season, we went back and we started to purchase these beans equitably. And that means we paid every bloody kilo that came out of our program. We increased the income on the farm by 300%. At 2.5 acres,
Wow.
at 2.5 acres of one farmer growing it, we actually stop them from being in poverty. We actually take them out of poverty at 2.5 acres.
That's amazing.
And that is our intention. Our intention
Yeah.
there is to go as big as we possibly can in order to stop poverty, in order to help people in the masses to overcome this particular challenge. So that was before Christmas of last year. Guess what happened afterwards? Our telephones didn't stop ringing.
Right.
My shoot was called over and over and over again.
Yeah.
This year, we are going to work with about 6,500 farmers, probably even more.
Wow.
The stats are going to be back next week. I'm going to be in Ghana next week, so I'll have the data next week for about 6,500 farmers. And the waiting list is north of 20,000 farmers who want to work with us.
Incredible. And correct me if I'm wrong, not only is it the paying the farmers, raising the income level, 300% per acre or 2.5 acres. Sorry if I just butchered all those stats, but not only are you paying them more money, you're also helping them to fix their soil so they can grow other foods. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I mean, we don't do it. The Bambara does it. So
right.
So the Bambara does it. The Bambara is a natural nitrogen fixing. So for a follow-on crop, so if the Bambara has done its magic for 2-3 seasons on one particular field, the Bambara will do its magic, will leave nitrogen behind. So the farmer doesn't need to apply synthetic fertilizer for a millet or a corn after the Bambara said, my job is done. I want to go next poor field because this field is ready for something else. That's the Bambara logic there. But you are right. We also work with biochar. We are bringing biochar back into the system in order to help this degraded arable land to store and retain the moisture, the sparse water that it rains, keep it back. Because biochar by its own right is not a fertilizer. It increases the carbon concentration. Yes, and over time it helps on that. But at the end of the day, it's a sponge. I call it a battery for soil nutrients as well as water. And the more biochar you have in the soil, the easier it is for the Bambara to grow steadily over the vegetative cycle. And we saw that in the first year, by just a little bit of biochar, we have seen up to 40% yield increase. And it has nothing to do with genetics, nothing to do. It's just simply making sure that the plants have water throughout the season, as well as nutrients. And that's a fantastic, easy way to fix it. And then, if you think biochar through, you are essentially in the carbon industry because you are taking atmospheric carbon, you remove it, you lock it permanently into biochar, and you're basically sequestering carbon. And that's a fantastic additional angle to what we're doing in terms of regenerating as to what's broken. So we are on a path to become a lifetime carbon zero company. By 2040, we want to be there. By 2030, we want to have enough excess carbon credits on the market in order to let others participate in our journey through them offsetting what they emit. It's that fills my heart to be able to actually talk about insetting in our business. Which other food supply chain can do that? I don't know of any. Either you have a carbon play or you have a food play, but we do it essentially under one roof, and that's just absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing to me how far we've strayed from simple solutions. Like biochar, maybe not in its current form, but like some version of it has been around for a very long time. And crop rotations have been around for a very long time. And like just doing those two basic things, now you got to have the technical assistance so the farmers actually know how to do it. You got to have the seed. There's enabling roadblocks. I get that. But, a lot of the work that I think we're doing and a lot of the money, and this is my personal gripe, is like going to wrong, super high tech things that I don't really know if it's necessarily what we need. And Chris, correct me if I'm wrong. I could be making this up and I'm working off one screen, so I can't check my notes from our previous call, but you make the biochar from the supply chain process of making the products, right? Or there's some sort of like upcycling component there. Or am I making that up?
No, your memory doesn't fail you. It's absolutely correct. The Bambara groundnut is a bean that essentially comes in a shell. Think of it very similar to peanuts. Though the difference is that the Bambara has like one bean in one shell. Peanuts have two. So the shell is a fantastic raw material as a starting point for biochar. And we want to do this at scale because what we also see is that there are tons of other agri-waste materials in the community that ultimately just rot and emit methane, or if the pile becomes too big and the community doesn't know anymore what to do with it, they just lit it on fire and off it goes in flames, and the carbon is back in the atmosphere. So there's another opportunity for us to basically go in, take this feedstock, bring it into a centralized location, use proper machines. We are not there yet, but we started that journey. Use proper machines to make high quality biochar. And then here comes another layer that you can think through. Once you have that, it's an exothermic process. In order to have biochar at steady state, you need probably 1/3 of the thermal energy back into the biochar pyrolysis process. But 2/3 become available. You can harvest that, make your electricity that you need in order to convert the beans into the ingredients portfolio. So you are basically self-sustaining, self-sustaining off the grid. And that is our project, Daring Greatly, as we call it. That's what our next big phase is going to be.
That is insane, man. Wow.
Chris, if it weren't 7:22 in the morning, I might have comprehended more of that, to be honest with you. But it sounds like an extraordinary process. And I mean, kudos to you for helping in the development of, it really just feels like such an opportunity, right?
But to recap, sorry to cut you off, Kyle. It's basically, it's a nitrogen fixing crop that has soil health principles that it has a waste stream that can be upcycled into biochar in a production manner that can create renewable energy. Like that's
exactly what it is.
Insane. Like that is awesome.
So I call it the regenerative intersection, where soil restoration, renewable energy, carbon sequestration, and well-being meet. That is, to me, the regenerative intersection of these 4 dimensions of work that unfolds at WhatIF Foods.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sorry, Kyle.
So I mean, no, it's all good. We spent a lot of time on the agronomy piece, which is great. This is like weird role reversal where Anthony has spent more time there than me, and I'm going to bring it back to the brand side, which is typically the opposite. But you're doing all this amazing work. You know, you get this incredible brand, you've got some incredible products. Walk us through what the journey has been like in the U.S. retail marketplace specifically. How are you presenting this? How is it being received? What are the challenges you're running into? And sorry, I'm always guilty of asking like 5 questions at the same time. I was just counting. I'm at 3. And I want to ask one more. Like, how are you feeling about the certification space in the regenerative movement?
Sorry, what was the last question you asked? I couldn't hear you.
How are you feeling about the certification space? You know, you're doing some incredible regenerative work. Yeah. So what's your take on certifications today? Is that coming in the future? How are you feeling about that? Yeah. You know, walk us through that process.
We can re-prompt you if you need reminders on all 7 of those.
Please help me.
4.
For sure. Okay, the process. Look, about I think it was May last year, you land at LAX. And then you try to make your first contacts. Lucky enough, I had a previous exposure to California. I did work in the Valley with folks. So there you have a couple of friends. And you get going and you start somewhere. Fast forward from there, we have launched May. Then in June, we had the first container coming in. By the way, this is the tail end of pandemic. We tend to forget that.
Wow.
The first container that we shipped into the United States was 4 months on water. 4 months on water. It usually takes you 5 weeks. Okay.
Ow.
So that was good because we had enough time to prepare ourselves.
Silver lining.
That's funny.
Wasn't intentional. That one wasn't. but yeah, you take it as it comes. So we started off with our Shopify. We figured out the first distribution centers and stuff like that. So that was okay. We got going. We had breakdowns in the system, fixed it, bug fixing, and we have a location out of LA, and this is where we basically flew in and started going. And then the initial work that they do attracts people. Some of them start buying. We had at that point in time, we had a super cool CNN article that literally gave us a kickstart. We were just going live with Shopify. It really gave us a kickstart, and all of a sudden you have a customer base. And that was so cool because you have interactions and so on and so forth. And then we went to the Fancy Food Show in Las Vegas. That was actually before May. And the master broker spotted us, Mike Moss, and he has done his magic. He said, I want to work with us. And he's done his magic. He got us going, got us started with his set of other friends. And about 6 months after that, after us getting started, we were successful on listing ourselves at KE and UNFI, two national distributors, which is also not so easy to get into. But and from there onwards, you go into more smaller retail chains, and you try to work your way through that system and see how this is all working. But today we are, I think, in 14 distribution centers throughout the United States, and are really ready to double down essentially in that sort of distribution. It has been fantastic so far. So I always say you can't work on velocity unless and until you are in the door. So we are in about 1,000 doors. By end of the year, probably 1,200 or so. And now we start really diligently working on velocity. We have some fantastic partners on that. And we want to make sure that we are in the store for a long period of time rather than being delisted in a short period of time. And that is the next challenge to overcome. We are working on that. We have, internally, actually, Mike, the guy who brought us together, he calls it liquid on lips, because the moment you actually taste our products, you are convinced. It just tastes awesome. It is fantastic. The easiest conversion for us is just making them taste. And then you tell the story. And then you have probably better believers, as we call them, for a lifelong time. So here we are. So that has been the journey. I don't think there's anything unique. We do not have the biggest marketing budget. We don't have the big bucks that actually force you into the retail shelves, because the retailers have to do it because they see you everywhere. We're not operating like that. We literally consciously also took the sort of grassroots approach, really come in, understand the law of the land, understand how it works, go into smaller shops to start with, figure out how you do that before you start really doubling down with big marketing budgets. And I feel that we are somewhat ready now on that journey, and it's fantastic. And then also, I have to say, Bambara Groundnut, we are the only manufacturer of the ingredients. We have a network of co-packers. Our noodles are manufactured in our own factory. So there's a finite capacity available to us. So we can't really go in with a big bang. It's not possible. But as we are building now, I spoke to 980 farmers first year, this year 6,800 farmers. So as we actually build our capacities on the back end side, we can actually look in the front end to say, so how are we approaching the next phase now? Is there now a more national-wide natural retailer, the right partner for us? And here are super cool conversations, to be honest, because once you have a setting with senior management of retailers and buyers, and you can actually then spend 15 minutes explaining the story, I guarantee you they don't leave the table at 15 minutes. They want to understand more and learn more. So that was great. Of course, Expo West has been fantastic for us as well with regards to that journey. It was just absolutely brilliant. We love to do it again and again and again. And here we are. So that's the journey in the United States. This country is fascinating. You have so many different nuances. You all folks speak English, so that's the easy part of it all. But then you have so many nuances, so many different habits, so many different beliefs and value systems. So it's absolutely great. So I just loved it. I love the journey here. It's just absolutely amazing. From one extreme that's called Africa, with all the challenges or the context that I've explained before, and then you come into this part of the world, and it's a totally different context. So it's fantastic to have this yin and yang going on. Regeneration and certification in overall. I have a love and hate relationship with certifications, and the reason is very simple. We try to measure everything. How do you measure trust? So here is my take. Unless and until we figure out what's the right thing to do, and we leave the certification space to only one vintage point, we will go down the same rabbit hole as the other certifications have done. call it fair trade, call it whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
So my plea to the regen movement is open your arms and welcome vintage points as wide as you possibly can. Think of regeneration, not just agriculture and what matters in the United States, because regeneration is a global phenomenon. We need to take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere globally. It's our mandate to help communities all over the world, also in the US, of course. Open your arms, welcome different vantage points, welcome different viewpoints. Just don't drag it just to suit one particular application, for lack of a better word. That is my plea to it. We also are on our journey to actually be ROC certified. We have about 150 acres of our trial fields that we are doing. We are on the journey because it is mandated. It's easier to communicate. It shortcuts you in the communication. If you are ROC certified, okay, retailers know what that means, and then they tick the box and they can actually go to the next discussion point. It's all great, but that is then the efficiency. Okay, but the effectiveness is, are we going to do the right thing? That must be addressed over and over and over again. And there's not just one right solution. There are many, many right solutions. And this is my take on certification in general, in particular, in this new one that is basically also under development, which is ROC.
First and foremost, kudos to answering every single question I asked. Not an easy task. So you did a great job. Well done. And it's my bad for continuing to do that all the time. But I think I really appreciate what you said about the certification space and how you're sort of advocating for both sides in a way that, like, the certifications are needed. They are a shortcut, not just for the buyers, but for the consumers also, so that they can really understand what this is and how they can adopt it. But at the same time, keeping that sort of big tent inclusive rather than an exclusive approach, and making sure that what we're measuring is really what matters, and that we're not creating systems for the sake of creating systems, or red tape for the sake of creating red tape that makes it more difficult to do what's needed to do on the ground. Right. So I think you said that really, really well. And I just really appreciate that perspective. I think, and this is a huge pivot transition. Or AC, you guys something else you want to add before we go somewhere else?
One thing to add there, which would be interesting to get y'all's perspective, because I'm not a brand operator, right? Like, I'm very much in a removed macro generalist kind of like role in this space. But Kyle, you're selling to retailers every day. Chris, you and your team are selling to retailers every day. And it almost seems like with other certifications, it's a binary proxy of trust, and there's at least a heightened awareness of an initial meaning. So let me unpack that a little bit. Like, I think the average consumer knows what non-GMO means when they see it on pack. I think the average consumer knows what USDA organic means. It might vary, and there might be some nuance there, but they at least recognize that there's awareness, there's some sort of meaning. We're nowhere near that for regen with any of the certifications. And so it almost seems like the bottleneck's actually the retailer, and the retailer's basically saying, we need something that we feel like validates us and the claim that we're making, and makes it a little easier on our side, because we just know that the awareness on the consumer side is not there. So I think that's really an interesting bottleneck, because that is flawed. If we design just around the retailer and we don't design for the end consumer, that system is doomed to fail. And we can talk a lot about what Kyle and I are working on in terms of that realm, but that was just a new insight that whole dialogue brought into my brain of that's not a long-term solution. I don't think that's going to work if we design in that, engineering capacity.
I agree with what you said. Absolutely agree. Any certification at the end of the day has to make sense to folks, be it the buyer who is also a consumer, but of course a little bit more educated consumer in average. But it has to make sense to the folk who goes into a Whole Foods or into a Sprouts, and it has to make sense there. Absolutely, people need to understand it. But there's also no help if then the certificate, the stamp, becomes diluted through wrong messaging, and there's another one. What does it really do?
I agree.
So I keep on coming back. We have to make sure that a couple of things here. Number one, we have to make sure that regeneration is not being dragged into the greenwashing space. If we make the mistake to let that happen, then it's shame on us. Shame on all of us who are in that space. Let it not be that way. Let us keep each other honest, and let us also call out where BS is. come in and call out where BS is. Because the last thing we need is that we exchange the term sustainability for regeneration, and then we are in the same bloody greenwashing space. I would hate that, to be honest. So here, that's my opinion on that one. And then with regards to overall, any certification needs to make sure that we are doing the right thing, measuring the right thing, what really matters, what does move the needle. Having a little bit of an ample sort of a traffic light system on a product today, it just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense, because they are praised within a category rather than over a diversified tire. So I would not participate. In Singapore, we have to. But stepping back, taking almost like the 40,000 feet sort of view on things and making sure that, okay, now we know what we try to achieve here, what we try to accomplish, rather than being the system expert and then just measuring because the system tells me I need to measure this. Like Ethan Mervold has said, former CTO of Microsoft, we're living in a day and age where specialization is being rewarded, but it comes at a huge cost because more and more people know more and more about less and less, and until they know everything about nothing. And that's the wrong thing. We need to step back and say, what is the right thing to do? How broad that, what is it that we need to do? And then start saying, okay, for this, it is this, this is this, and so forth.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting, the specialization piece in particular. But I do want to pivot because I want to make sure we spend some time on the noodles. And I also want to talk about, what may be coming after the noodles. What does the future hold for WhatIF Foods? Are there new categories? Are there new crops? Like, does it start with trying to find more degraded land in different areas? Is it going to stay in Africa? Sorry, I'll stop there. You're holding
I'm counting your questions.
Chris is counting questions. So
for those not watching on video, Chris started counting Kyle's questions on his hands.
That's the best way to get me to stop. So great work.
Chris, I love that you did that, not me. That's great. Kyle, we love you, man. We love your multi-pronged questions.
I love it.
It's AC and I fight over who gets to ask this question, so I got to try to sneak as many in as I can when I get the opportunity.
This is so cool. Yeah. So where do we start? We start with noodles. Look, this is a fascinating category. Okay. The whole idea was created by me walking in a factory that produces about 5 billion portions on an annual basis. 5 billion portions on an annual basis. Wow. It's a gigantic manufacturing footprint. You go in a visitor's gallery, you look down into the production hall, and after the 10th line, you don't distinguish. You just see stainless steel after stainless steel, blah, blah, blah. So it was, and I go there, and this particular person who showed me through the factory told me, we are super proud because our noodles only have 17% of vegetable oil in it, palm oil. And at the same time, I was actually working on palm oil back in Southeast Asia and knowing the sort of problems it is being associated with, including deforestation, including effluent treatment and what have you, and community resettlements and what have you. So I thought, goodness me, we are in the 21st century and we're using deep frying to dehydrate a product to make it shelf stable so that we can actually go away with doing it in chilled forms. And I thought there must be a better way of doing this. It cannot be that we do that because 80 years ago it was the right thing to do, and 80 years ago it was all about, after the Second World War, it was all about making one portion as calorific dense as we possibly can in order to feed the empty bellies. Then deep frying was cool because you have a lot of calories in a noodle, refined flour and refined vegetable oils, and here you go, you're done for the day. But for the 21st century, this is probably absolutely the wrong approach. But we are still making use of the very same technology. So I got back and I immediately started to ask, so what if we take the deep fry out? What if we can actually then start looking at a totally different production process, but also inclusion of other ingredients that otherwise would never survive the harsh conditions in a deep fryer. So if you look at our portfolio of instant noodles, we have the green ones that contain moringa, and you could not deep fry them. If you deep fry them, the color will go off. So that is all the what if questions. It all led us into this sort of thinking concepts and what have you. So we got started in this project, and it was a very, very rough ride. I tell you, taking the deep fryer out commercially viable. And on a, in a university setting, in a pilot plant, you can do it easily.
Yeah.
But can you scale it? Can you scale it so that it becomes commercially viable? Was a big, big undertaking. And quite frank, it was the R&D team and I at some point where we sat over dinner on a table, and I said, no more money into this project. This is not going to get us anywhere. We fail here. And it was literally, we were literally sitting on a table, and there was tissue paper. And I looked at the tissue paper, and we said, what's the price of this tissue paper? Nobody knew. What's the cost of the tissue paper? Nobody knew. So how the hell are they dehydrating water from this tissue paper? How does the paper pulp industry do it? How do they make toilet paper so cheap that we don't even know how much it costs?
Interesting.
And that got us going to think about dehydrating the water away from a dough, totally different than it is currently done using deep frying. So fast forward from there, it literally took us just 3 months after that question.
Wow.
We went to a manufacturer, a fabricator of these sort of machines for the paper pulp industry. We learned a ton, and we cross-learned and cross-applied. And today we have a technology that we found in the paper pulp industry, making our instant noodles. And to me, it's just cross-learning and cross-applying. And here we are. So today we have a product. It's not fried anymore. It's not deep fried anymore. Therefore, we had this opportunity because there's no palm oil in the product, 20%, and we immediately replaced it with Bambara flours. So the play on the noodles was initially really a deep frying play. And today we are in much higher inclusions in the dough, and therefore have a high protein content with complex carbohydrates and fibers. So it's a perfect gym sort of an exercise. If you're sick and tired of your protein shake and you want to have after workout something that is savory and something that has a bite and a structure, actually we have a huge following community in the gym space for our instant noodles. And here we go. So that is the journey. New products are being launched very, very soon. We are building additional capacity as we are speaking. Our first capacity has been sold out already. We're building new capacities. We bring more and more products to the market, including single serves. And that journey is just really fantastic.
Yeah, I'm looking at the nutritional profile right now that you've got on the website, and I just want to just share some of this info. So, like, I'm going to do WhatIF foods versus average deep fried instant ramen. It's 300 calories for WhatIF versus 457, 17 grams of protein versus 9.3, 6 grams of fiber versus 2.7, 7 grams of fat versus 18.2. Like, the nutritional profile here is outrageous. So yeah, I mean, really, really cool. And I love that you guys, like, you're trying to solve this problem. And you found the existing...
By the way. It tastes nice. Honestly.
I believe it. I mean, I assumed as much after the conversation about the coconut oil. It doesn't feel to me like you would ever launch a product that you would not enjoy consuming. But I love that you're trying to solve this problem about the dehydration, and you found an existing technology that's just in a different industry and applied it to the creation of noodles for the first time. I think that's just such a cool way to develop a new product and to enter a new category with this new nutritional profile. It's huge. So I'm so glad I asked about the noodles. This is great.
And I want to tip my cap, Chris, to you, because like this is a very tech forward company, and you're bringing technology to these problems, but you're doing it with like such intention and such integrity. And I think there's a lot of bad tech, I think, going on in our world right now, trying to solve problems. And I love the intention behind a lot of it, because I think they're trying to do great things. But like this just seems like such an awesome mix of, overlaying technology and thinking through things from a scientific perspective, but with that real world ecological knowledge like blended into it from a model perspective.
Thank you. I leave it like that because it's really the intention. Look, we always start to say we need to pivot away from the current system. So you want to innovate against the current system's challenges, right? And noodles is just one example. The milk is the same example. We don't refine. We don't refine. We have a total new production process to the milk as well. And this is a heavy lifting, though. I tell you, today synthetic biology, you can get a new vector, a new host for a few $100,000. Hey, our investment in the meantime is north of a $2-digit million investment in everything that we have done, because it costs a ton of money to build the capacities for these new processes.
Yeah.
And the problem is like this. I don't like to talk about problems. The challenge is this.
Yeah.
We have to invest upfront into the back end before we invest the first dollar into the brand, because we don't want to generate awareness about the brand and then not being able to deliver on the back end of things. So it's really, really capital intensive what we're doing, and that's really the hard part of it. It's not just a marketing gimmick. It's not a marketing story. It is truly, truly system thinking and doing it from the ground up, literally. Super capital intensive.
I believe it, and that sort of segues nicely into that future. What comes next, because it's so capital intensive. Do we stick to the same two categories we're in now with the alternative milks and the noodles, or are there any other projects right now where you're looking at venturing into a new category, or utilizing a new ingredient? What does R&D look like for WhatIF?
So you can share.
My science brain and my science head tells me, let's bloody launch the next category, next category, next category.
Yeah.
That is the entrepreneur in me. But the reality of the fact is that by and large out there in America, how many people know us? A tiny, tiny, tiny small fraction. So we have a ton to do to bring our existing portfolio to folks out here. Launching right now is just overwhelming everybody. So I have to step back a little bit, hold myself back and say, let's do the hard grind and the heavy lifting with our existing categories.
Yeah.
However, within the category, you will see pretty soon new expansions within the category. So we're thinking of, we have 3 milks today. The next one that's going to come online is going to be the creamer space. Then there's going to be a ready-to-drink solution, particularly thinking of the Gen Zs and how they consume today. On the noodle space, I've already mentioned, we're going to go into single serves and other flavor profiles, probably one more additional color. Those sort of things are all within an existing category that helps us doubling down on the offering that we have. I would love to go into other categories. There's so many applications that are wide open, starting from bread into biscuits and going into even the extrusion space. But that would literally be far too early for now. I have to hold myself back and say, no, would be the wrong thing to do from a business point of view. Yeah. So, but watch the space. It's going to be an exciting 24 with regards to expansion within the category.
Yeah, I think, with my sales hat on, I think remaining in the existing categories is absolutely the right play, because not only is it expensive on the back end, like you mentioned earlier, it's also really expensive on the front end as a brand to play in all these different categories. You're buying data for every different category. You're developing relationships with every different category buyer, which means you have more bandwidth from your sales team required versus, if you've got 3 alternative milks and you turn that into 9 or 10 alternative milks, there's still that one individual, you're managing more SKUs. There's still more to manage there. But from a trade and promotional planning perspective, it's a lot easier to manage than jumping into 4 or 5 different categories, at which point your overhead for your sales team is going to have to increase. So I think it's a really, really good move. And I think your brand is very well positioned, WhatIF Foods, to be an omni-category brand eventually. But I think you're spot on strategically. Like, let's focus on doubling down on the existing categories, building those doors, developing those relationships, and then, when the time is right and you've got the right next product, like maybe jump into that next category.
Yeah, thank you. I agree.
There's a reason why in CPG they say each new category is like a different business, and it's for all of those reasons and more that you just listed, Kyle. So I agree there for sure. Chris, we could talk forever, man. I know you got a flight to catch, so let's take us home with our final question. I'm really interested in what your answer is going to be. So the question we ask everyone, we wrap every episode with, is how do we get Regen brands to have 50% market share by 2050? How do we do that?
50% market share. Well, gosh, I would love to be there. I'm not prepared for that question, so let me think. I think it's possible simply because the effect of climate change is real. We feel it everywhere. I'm here in Arizona, and I've shared earlier that certain communities have been cut off 80% of their water supplies because of the high concentration of water demand on the Colorado River. So, and folks feel it. I know if you look at what happened in Europe, there's flood, there's fire in places that never happened. Just today, switch on in the morning, the news, and you see it on the news in Hawaii that there are wildfires.
Yeah.
So I guess the weather situations are the alarm bell for all of us. And I don't think that the current industry, particularly retailers, can navigate themselves out of being progressive on this one. Simply because I think by 2030 in the US you have 55 or 56 million Gen Zs entering the workforce.
Wow.
So there are 55 million new voters coming in, and they vote not only casting their vote for a political situation, but they're also casting their vote with every purchase that they make in the supermarket.
Yeah.
And they will be leading the change. I'm super hopeful, and I know I put a lot of pressure on them, but they will start doing the right things. They will help us pivot from who we are today to a much better version, to our better. I think Gen Zs will help us to be a much better version tomorrow than we are today. And that's how I think we need to look at the situation of pivoting it into 50% market share. I think it is possible.
Yeah, I agree. Young people, the future people you gotta help guide, the problems that have been created by the older people. I could have found a way more elegant way to say that, but yeah, it's very accurate. And
it's early. Cut yourself some slack. It's fine.
And well, Chris, you
it is fine. It is fine because just to build on that for one sentence, if I speak to my parents, they're in their 80s now, they say we did not know. And they are right. They did not know. My generation has no excuse. We know. If you keep on doubling down on the old system, you have to look into the mirror at one stage and say, is that really what I should have done? Our generation is the one. But then I have two Gen Z kids. If they ask me to purchase something because it's better for the planet, I don't have any argument against that. I will certainly do. And this is where change is coming about. If I have asked my parents to purchase something because I like it, what did they say? Get out of the house. It's not the case anymore. They have a super valid argument. So anyway, sorry I interrupted you, AC.
No, you're fine. But I love the way you frame that, because I think every answer we've had comes back to the economy or policy, right? And you touched on both of those things. But the way you frame the amount of Gen Zs hitting a certain being employed, that threshold in 2030, right? That is, they have money to spend in the economy and they're of age to vote. And like that's the big thing, because right now they are very into sustainability. They're very active and they're activists on social, but like they don't have as much power to actually create the change, right? It's more just conversation right now. And I think people like WhatIF, brands like WhatIfs that are going to be in a position to like capture that are building for the right thing, because it's going to be probably insane, honestly, when it happens.
Yeah, agreed. Chris, like Anthony said, we could probably talk for hours. Super appreciate your time. This has been a very enjoyable conversation. Want to make sure that any listener who wants to find the brand, the website is whatif-foods.com. So be sure to check it out. Again, it's super, super cool branding. Love the packaging for the noodles. The hexagon is just cool. But yeah, man, really appreciate everything you shared. Love the work that you're doing, and looking forward to trying WhatIF for the first time and seeing what you guys do in the future.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Absolute pleasure here. I like that we have discussed this very heavy topic about bringing system change about in the agri-food space and all the unintended consequences that we also talked about. But we spoke about it with a lot of laughter in between, and the conversation really got us. I hope it also inspires others to take it with a pinch of salt, everything, and just look out for the right solutions and be the regeneration. Don't be timid. Be it.
Amen.
Love that.
Appreciate you, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, folks.
For show notes, episode transcripts, and more information on our guests and what we discuss on the show, check out our website, regen-brands.com. That is regen-brands.com. You can also find our Regen recaps on the website. Regen recaps take less than 5 minutes to read and cover all the key points of the full hour-long conversations. You can check out our YouTube channel, Regen Brands Podcast, for all of our episodes with both video and audio. The best way to support our work is to give us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform, subscribe to future episodes, and share the show with your friends. Thanks for tuning in to the Regen Brands Podcast, brought to you by the Regen Coalition and Outlaw Ventures. We hope you learned something new in this episode, and it empowers you to use your voice, your time, and your dollars to help us build a better and more regenerative food system. Love you guys.